Hello, my name is Colin Stewart, and this is a presentation on the use of AssetWise in integrated asset management for transportation infrastructure. During the presentation, I will explain what the core capabilities of AssetWise are and demonstrate the main features. AssetWise is a generic, configurable, integrated asset management system for any asset class, whether it be linear or non-linear. For example, those could be structures, roadside furniture, geotechnical or drainage assets, or any other asset class commonly managed within the transportation arena. It is based on common capabilities shared by all asset classes that comply to the principles of good asset management. You have to know what you own, you have to know where assets are, you have to know the historic and current condition of what you own, as well as the historic and current performance of those assets. It's also key that you know the historic, current, and any planned work schedule. Using this information allows you to take a risk-based approach to your organization's asset management. Some asset classes may have a specific requirement over and above the capabilities of the core AssetWise solution. Where this is the case, additional features are added on top of the core capabilities, therefore enhancing the overall solution. Common examples might be network tracing for drainage assets or load management for structures. This diagram shows the core capabilities of the AssetWise solution, and we'll go through each of these topics in detail during the presentation. At the heart of AssetWise is the Asset Register, which allows you to model and manage your assets. Some of the main features of the Asset Register include full support for asset hierarchies such as structures or even signs with poles and plates, the ability to define unlimited custom attribution to define the properties and describe the asset, a status code which allows the current position within the asset lifecycle to be indicated, as well as derived attributes and dependent attributes to help model the asset attributes. The dependent attribute values can come from one of two sources. The attribute value can either be dependent on another attribute of the same record, or it could be dependent on a related object, and I'll show some examples of that in a moment. And lastly, one other feature of the asset attribution is the ability to model an attribute as a data table with multiple attribute values and multiple records within each attribute. Here we have some examples of the features that I've just described. On the left-hand side, we can see an example of the asset hierarchy, where you can see that the asset has got several child assets, and some of the child assets also have some child assets, therefore forming an asset hierarchy. The middle screenshot shows an example of dependent attribute values. The first example we have is where the attribute value is dependent on a related object. In this case, the defect type attribute of a defect is dependent on the asset type that it's related to. And the second example we have is where the attribute value for defect is dependent on another attribute value that has been pre-populated for the defect type. And on the right-hand side, we can see an example of a data table attribute where the weather condition has been modeled with attributes for the weather condition itself as well as the date. And you can see there are multiple records. Our next core capability is linear network locations. Features may be located and referenced by any linear network type within the network model. Typically, these may include maintenance sections, traffic sections, state or interstate routes, or any other linear network type modeled within the application. Features can have multiple network locations, and these can either be point, as in the case of a sign, or a continuous location, such as a guardrail. AssetWise can derive the spatial geometry of a network location using a process known as dynamic segmentation. And importantly, these locations can be kept in sync when network changes such as split or merge occur. As well as having network locations, features may also have an independent off-network location, and these can either be modeled as point, line, or polygon geometry types. We also support the concept of cross-sectional position to allow the lateral location of features to be modeled. And lastly, features can be located on multiple networks. This is of particular importance when modeling multiple network infrastructures within the same application, such as road or drainage, where a gully, for example, might be located and referenced relative to the road network, but also relative to the drainage network that it serves. Here we have an example of an asset with three distinct locations. You can see that this asset is located on the A46, the M40 southbound, and the M40 northbound. And the significance of this is that this asset is actually a bridge that carries a road over the bridge and two roads underneath the bridge, each modelled as an independent location of the asset. In this example, we have an asset located on multiple networks. You can see that the manhole is located on the road network relative to the I-25, but it's also located on the drainage network that it serves. So now let's have a look at how to create an asset, how to add a location of that asset using the map, and how to add a child asset, therefore creating an asset hierarchy. When you log into the system, you're shown the Launchpad, which is a series of tiles, each containing several features relating to the topic that the tile represents. So I'm going to select the new asset from the Assets tab. I'm going to select the asset class or asset type from a drop-down list, which will populate the appropriate attributes for that asset class. Once that's done, I can enter important details such as the title, the reference number, which can be generated by the system. I'll enter a status code from the drop-down list of available status codes and enter a start date. Once I've saved that, the screen will change and show me all of the other tabs representing functionality for the asset, such as an asset location, activities, conditions, and documents. So let's go in and add a location. I'll select off-network location, which will display the map. And for this particular asset type, it's represented by a point geometry. And it's as simple as clicking on the map, entering a short description for the asset location, a date when it's appropriate, and saving the location. And that will create the spatial geometry that can be displayed on all of the AssetWise maps. If we look at the text view, we can see the description and the start date. If the asset had been represented by a polygon geometry type, again, the user could just simply digitize the polygon, enter the description and date, or if it was a line feature, you can digitize the line feature representing the asset. I may also want to add a linear network location. So on screen, you can see an example of where the asset has been located on the network. Now let's add some child assets to form a hierarchy. I can select Add from the tree, select the asset type as appropriate, and enter any other information that's needed to create the actual asset, as you've seen previously in the demonstration. Let's add a second child asset. The list of asset types available is limited to only those asset types that have been modeled as children of the selected parent. And to finish the process, let's select one of the child assets and add another asset. You can see the drop-down list of asset classes is shorter, again only including those asset types which are appropriate in this case for the span asset. I can enter a title, a reference number, a status, and any other appropriate information relevant to the asset that I've just created. And that's the hierarchy finished. Now that we've completed the asset hierarchy, let's now change the status code to reflect its true status. From the Actions menu, we can select Update Status, select an appropriate value from the available drop-down list, enter some remarks, and save, therefore changing the status code of the asset. Our next core capability is that of restrictions. A restriction is anything that imposes some limitation on the network, whether it be through the closure of an asset, closure of a road, or some limit that might be imposed against the asset, such as a height restriction, a weight restriction, or potentially a width restriction. Limit types are configurable within the system to allow any constraint to be modeled within the AssetWise solution. The restrictions are related to asset locations, allowing weight restrictions on bridges, height restrictions on gantries, or any other constraint to be modeled. They can also be linearly located on a network, allowing features such as speed limit on a road to be modeled and managed. So let me now demonstrate how restrictions are managed. In this example, I want to add a restriction to an existing asset. So from the map, I'm going to use one of the select tools to select the feature that I'm interested in. You can see that it's selected the Kilwarren Bridge, and from the map I can select Open Details, which will display the Master Asset screen. When I go to the Locations tab, I can see the network location. And what I want to do is change the view to show any restrictions. And in this case, there aren't any. So from the Actions menu, I'm going to select and add restriction, which will allow me to type in the appropriate details for my restriction. So let's start off with the restriction type, which in this case is weight restriction. I can add a restriction name, restriction description, and because this is a temporary weight restriction, I can add in a from and to date along with the upper limit. And that's created my restriction. I can expand to view the details. And when I have a look at the locations, you can see that a restriction has been applied, and on the right-hand side, a little icon was displayed. Our next core capability is geospatial data management and mapping. Within the AssetWise map, spatial data can be displayed from many different data sources. It can also have multiple background layers, for example, aerial photography or any other base map that adds context to the map display. The map is more than a presentation tool, as it allows features to be located via the map. It also allows features to be selected and identified to view information about the selected features. It also includes tools to allow the user to measure things, whether that be an area or a line, but also to get the linear reference at any network location. Users are presented with a map catalog with a list of the map layers that the user has access to. The user can select a layer from the catalog and move it to their active layers, from where they can view the legend, determine the selectability of features within the layer, or even set the transparency levels of the layer being displayed. The AssetWise mapping also allows two-way interaction with the asset register, where the user can select a feature from the map and navigate to the form to view its details, or the user can select to view the location of a feature on the map whilst in the form. So let's have a look at the spatial data management and map controls within AssetWise. The map is launched by selecting the appropriate tool from the tile. Let's have a look at the navigation options. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can zoom to extent, you can zoom to a default extent, or you can save an extent as your home extent, or you can use the pan tool to generally navigate around. You can also use the previous button, takes you to the previous extent, and the map remembers where you have been. You can also go to the next extent. You can set the scale by selecting from a predefined list. And let's zoom to an extent on the map. An important feature of the map control is the map layer control. So let's have a look at the catalog. The catalog gives you a list of all of the layers that you as a user have got access to. These layers can be grouped into logical groupings of map layers, in this case road network and asset layers. And as previously mentioned, you can add as many background layers as you've got access to add context. These layers can be switched on or off. And you can also set the transparency levels of not just the background layers, but any map layers. When the user wants to see a layer on the map, they select it from the catalog, which moves it into their active layer list. From here, layers can be switched on or off. You can look at the legend. You can see that you can have thematic symbology. And if we switch on a network layer, you can see that you can also add labels to any of the layers displayed on the map. Let's take a look at the select tools. You can select by point, by rectangle, or by polygon. So let's select by rectangle. In this case, one single feature has been selected. And the reason for that is that only one layer has been defined as a selectable layer. So let's go back to your map catalog and set the selectability of another active layer. Repeating the selection process this time, we'll select all of the features of any of the layers marked as selectable. And in this case, you can see quite a number of network sections have been selected, as well as a bridge and large culvert. To navigate to a specific feature in the Select tool, you can click on the push pin, and the map pans, zooms, and centers on the feature and displays some information to add context. You can click on the Open Details link, which will open the screen and display the selected feature. In this case, it's an asset. And I can look at the location of that asset within the asset screen, and you can see the same map display. So let's go back to our map. There are a series of tools that allows you to measure either lines or areas. So let's measure an area. And lastly, let's have a look at the print option. You can select a paper size, add a map title, add a map description, and select print. Our next set of core capabilities are activities, conditions, and repairs, and we look at these together as they are very closely related. For example, an activity might be an inspection, the outcome of the inspection might be a series of defects or conditions, and each one of those defects or conditions may have multiple repairs. For example, that could be an immediate repair, several intermediate repairs, followed by a permanent repair, thus closing down the defect itself. An activity is the generic term we give to things such as inspections, assessments, appraisals, or even planned or cyclic maintenance such as grass cutting or gully emptying. AssetWise supports the configuration of multiple activity types with custom attributes and properties to best support your business needs. It also supports a relationship model between an activity type and an asset type, therefore constraining an asset type to only those activities that are appropriate for that asset type. We also have something known as activity type sets. This is a grouping of more than one activity type into a set for scheduling purposes. It may be more efficient to schedule different types of inspections to occur at the same time so that you can use the resources needed to carry out those activities in a more efficient manner. With risk-based asset management very much to the fore, AssetWise allows default recurrence patterns and intervals for an activity type, asset type combination to be defined. However, it also allows those default recurrence patterns to be overridden for specific instances of an asset based upon some risk profile, therefore allowing the activity to be scheduled more or even less frequently than would be the case under the standard recurrence pattern and interval. For example, you may have an inspection regime where you inspect an asset every 24 months. However, based upon perhaps the condition of the asset, you may want to inspect it every 12 months or even every 36 months. So AssetWise allows you to schedule activities based upon the recurrence pattern, but also allows you to override the recurrence pattern based upon some risk profile. The scheduling engine within AssetWise also allows auto-scheduling, whereby the system will automatically calculate when the next activity for an asset is due based upon the completion of the last activity of that type on the asset. Activities also have a status code, allowing the position within the life cycle of the activity to be recorded. One possible outcome of an activity might be a condition record. Condition is a generic term used to describe the outcome of an activity, and for example, that could be a defect, an observation, or even a simple set of results. These condition types are definable and configurable, such that you can create structures defect types, pavement defect types, observations, or even condition ratings, each with a different set of attributes, and each with a different relationship model to the appropriate activity and asset type. We also allow condition records to be versioned or revisioned to allow, for example, defects to be taken into the field. You can version or revision the defect, update the defect record, thus allowing different versions of the same defect over time, and as with activities, a condition record has a status code, allowing the position within the life cycle of the condition data to be recorded. Some business workflows dictate that defects have a series of repairs associated with them, and it is the execution and completion of these repairs that actually closes down the defect. So to enable this, AssetWise allows the configuration of multiple repair types, whether that might be a temporary repair, a permanent repair, or a make-safe immediate repair, and allow these repair types to be related to the appropriate condition types. When we come to talking about task ordering later in the presentation, you will see that multiple repairs can exist on a single task order. And while capturing the data for a repair, you can record information such as the date due, the target completion date, and indeed when the actual repair was carried out. AssetWise also allows the cost capture using standard price list items as well as templates to model example repair actions. The example screenshot we see now on screen shows a single repair on the left-hand side for a defect, and on the right-hand side you can see the defect itself has had 4 repairs. It has a make-safe repair with some standard items associated with it, but you can see that it also has 2 temporary repairs as well as a permanent repair. So that shows that a single defect can have multiple repairs, each with its own life cycle, and each repair being able to be added to a task order to get the repairs carried out and ultimately for the defect to be completed and closed out. So let's now have a look at how AssetWise manages activities, conditions, and repairs. Let's start off with having a look at the activities for one specific asset. So using a quick search, I can use the type ahead function to find the asset very quickly. So let's type in the name, select the asset from the type ahead list, and have a look at the activities for this particular asset. You can see that on the Activities tab, all of the activities are displayed, showing information such as the activity ID, the type of activity, when it's due, and if it has been completed, the date when it was completed. Using the standard functions, we can filter the grid, or we can order it based on any of the attributes displayed. So let's go ahead and order it based on date due. One of the standard features of the grids is the ability to export to Excel. So let's export all our activities for the Waterloo Bridge to Microsoft Excel. And when we have a look at that, you can see that the activities have been exported in date due order. If I'm only interested in a specific activity type such as maintenance inspection, I can select it on the vertical menu, therefore limiting the display of the activities to that particular activity type. Selecting the hyperlink for an activity will display the details of the activity where I can view its attributes, and I can also view any condition records that have been created as a result of, in this case, an inspection. And you can see the list of condition records along with the asset that it was created against, the date when it was created, and the activity ID. So let's have a look at how to create some new conditions, in this case defects, against my asset. Firstly, the user selects a condition type, and this allows then the user to open up the asset hierarchy and select the asset or the component assets against which to create the defects. In this case, I'm going to select multiple spans because the same type of defect is on all of the spans. I can enter a priority, I can enter a status code, put in the date when it was discovered, and any other appropriate attribution. When the record is saved, this will create a defect for each of the selected components. In my case, it should create 4 new defects, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, displayed on spans 1, 2, 3, and 4. One of the other things I may want to do is view all of the condition records or defects against the asset that haven't been created against a particular inspection. So on the Condition tab on the master screen, I can see all of the defects along with the components that they've been raised against, the date they were discovered, and if they were created as the outcome of an activity, the inspection ID. I can also create a condition record directly against the asset without having to first create an inspection. I can enter the details, the status code, the date discovered, and any other appropriate information. And in this case, that will create the defect directly against the asset. And you can see over on the right-hand side, there's no activity ID for this particular condition. So let's have a look at how to configure the recurrence pattern used for scheduling an activity. From the main menu, I can select Configure Activity, Asset Schedules. The first job is to select the activity type, followed by the asset type that the activity relates to. Then you can set the recurrence pattern. The options are none, which means that it won't be scheduled, but it would be created on an ad hoc basis. You could select daily, and perhaps decide that this will occur every 7 days, but exclude weekends. You could set a recurrence pattern weekly to say you want to do this every 2 weeks perhaps. Another option is monthly, where you could say you want this activity to occur every 24 months. Or you could set it to a yearly pattern and say that you want to do this every 2 years, for example. So let's go back to the monthly pattern and have a look at the base on previous activity occurrence. Setting the recurrence pattern to be based on the previous activity occurrence means that the scheduling engine will look at the last activity of this particular type that was carried out on the asset and work out when the next one is due based upon the previous activity occurrence. When the recurrence pattern is set to base on previous activity occurrence, you also have the option to set it to auto schedule, which will mean that the system will automatically create the next activity when the previous one is completed. The auto schedule will then either use the date and time due or the date and time completed of the previous activity occurrence in order to work out when the next activity is due. Lastly, let's have a look at the recurrence pattern of seasonal. Certain activities only take place during particular seasons in the year. For example, grass cutting may only take place in the summer, whereas gullying, emptying, cyclic maintenance activities may take place in the winter. So AssetWise allows you to set up a recurrence pattern with a seasonal adjustment pattern. So let's go ahead and create a seasonal recurrence pattern starting on March 30th, running through October 1st. As well as the default recurrence pattern, each individual asset can have an override. So let's search for our Waterloo Bridge again and set up an override recurrence pattern for several of the activities. On the Activities tab, we can select Manage Activity Intervals, which displays all of the activities and the intervals that have been set up as default. We can look at the default recurrence pattern. You can see in this case, it's set up to recur every 2 years. But based upon some risk profile, we can change this and set up an override to say that instead of doing it every 2 years, we want to do it on a monthly basis. And we want to have this activity recur every 12 months. And we're going to base it on the previous occurrence, set it up as auto scheduling based upon the date and time due. Our next core capability is task orders. AssetWise allows for the configuration of different task order types depending on the nature of the work to be carried out, and this falls into 2 main categories. The task order can either be an activity-based task order or a condition-type task order. So for example, an activity-type task order might be a task or work order to carry out a series of inspections or assessments, whereas a task order for a condition-type data might be to go out and carry out some repairs to clear some defects. A task order can be related to a contract and therefore a contractor, and we can also manage budgetary information through the financial aspect of the task order. Importantly for efficiency, multiple task order lines can exist on a single task order, and each of the task order lines can capture the cost in terms of the estimated work to be carried out, but also the actual quantities and therefore the actual cost of the work that was carried out in the field. Each task order line independently has a target due date, and you can also record completion dates. And as for other previously described objects, a task order and a task order line each have a status code allowing the position of the task order within the lifecycle to be recorded. Here are some example screenshots of a task order. On the left-hand side, you can see the task order master details screen that shows information relating to the task order, such as the task order type, the contract, and some key dates such as the date raised and the target date. The task order can also record a default budget that will be used by each task order line to determine the budget against which the cost of the work being carried out will be accrued, although the default budget can be changed for each individual task order line. On the right-hand side, we can see a series of task order lines with a summary of each being displayed, such as the defect ID, the repair type, the asset against which the defect was recorded, and the completion date. If we select one of the task order lines and look at more detail, you can see that each task order line can have an independent budget. It has got the defect information related to it, and you can also see the task items that have been associated with the repair, along with the quantities and cost of completing the repair. Our next core capability is mobile working. The AssetWise solution is underpinned by data-driven asset management, where quality asset data is a fundamental building block of any asset management strategy, as are the processes that keep that information updated. It is important that asset data can be kept up to date in terms of new assets being collected in the field, existing assets being updated, and condition surveys being conducted in a timely and efficient manner. To this end, AssetWise provides a comprehensive set of map-based mobile apps to ensure that information can be collected and updated in the field, ensuring the quality and timeliness of information managed by AssetWise. Condition and performance measurement and monitoring are an integral component of good practice asset management. Utilizing enterprise-wide quality information, AssetWise analytic tools calculate performance metrics and indicators that measure and assess the physical condition of an asset. Examples include bridge condition indicators for the structures asset class and pipeline condition indicators from CCTV survey inspections for the drainage asset class. By comparing condition and performance indicators against identified targets and goals, the strengths and weaknesses in performance can be identified. By monitoring the metrics over time, warning of progressive degradation in performance can be identified so that corrective action can be taken at an early stage. Thus, condition and performance measures provide important inputs into decision-making processes relating to the management of existing assets. For many users of AssetWise, their main requirement centers around performance management and reporting. They wish to see aggregated high-level executive information, and only when a particular area is underperforming do they wish to investigate further. This is sometimes referred to as an executive dashboard or report scorecard. AssetWise reporting dashboards allow corporate key performance and national indicators to be displayed, giving users and managers alike instant access to up-to-date information. AssetWise also provides a comprehensive set of standard reports that are designed to meet specific business needs. Many reports come with a standard set of parameters, the values of which can be changed to suit the user's requirements, and the reports can be output in a variety of formats such as CSV, Microsoft Excel, or PDF. And finally, AssetWise provides the users the ability to create their own ad hoc or custom reports, allowing easy access to all information managed within the system. Our next core capability is document and records management. AssetWise provides a full document and records management capability, where documents can be linked to any feature. For example, you could link documents to assets, activities such as inspections, or even network sections. Files can be dragged and dropped to link to those features, making document creation easy for the user. Once files and documents have been created, those files and documents can be checked in, they can be checked out, the document can be revisioned, document copies could be created, or the document and files can be shared through the use of the AssetWise email sharing facility. Documents also have an approval process. As well as document management, AssetWise provides full records management, where disposal rules and file plans can be created to determine the destruction disposal definition for a particular document class. In other words, for how long the files have to be retained and when it has to be disposed of. Those documents can be added to disposal orders, which again have an approval process, whereby a document manager could reject a disposal order or submit and approve the order, thereby destroying the files within the disposal order itself. So let's have a look at how AssetWise manages documents and records. To begin with, let's look at the documents already associated with a particular asset. So in this case, I'm going to use the basket to select my asset, go to the Documents tab, and straight away we'll see all the documents associated with my particular asset. Selecting the Show All Documents on the vertical menu displays all of the documents, including the status code, any revision numbers, the title, and the number of files. If I'm interested in a particular type of document, I can select it from the vertical menu, therefore limiting the grid display to document classes of that particular type. So in this case, drawings and sketches. If I want to add a new document, it's simple as dragging and dropping the file into the grid. So let's select a file, drag it into the grid, drop it in, and you'll see that the system will create the document and attach the file for me. And we can see our new document with the file has been created. To view and manage the document, you can click on the hyperlink, which will display the master document screen, from where I can view the attributes. I can update values such as effective from or any custom attributes that have been defined for the document. And I can manage the files. So let's have a look at how to add a new file into the master copy. Simply again by dragging and dropping the appropriate file from my File Explorer onto the grid. And that will create a new file against the existing document. Selecting a file allows me to use the File Actions menu, which is where I can check in, check out, cancel checkout, upload a new file, or download a local copy. Now that I've created the document and added the files, let's go ahead and approve it. So from the Actions menu, I can select Approve, and you can see that the icon representing the document has changed and added a little green tick to indicate that the document is approved. And having a look at the attributes, we can see that the approval status has now been set to A for approved, and no further changes can be made to the document. To make changes to the document or add files, you either have to unapprove the document, or in my case, create a new revision. So creating a new revision, you can simply add the revision number, or you can use the advanced options and select which files you want to copy to the new revision and what relationship types are also to be copied. In this case, I could select the relationships for my assets. So let's go ahead, put a revision number in and create the document revision. You can see that the new document revision has been created. It's set to unapproved, and the approval status is N, and it's created the revision with the effective date of today. So let's go ahead and finish that and approve it. One of the other things I might want to do is have a look to see what assets the existing document is associated with. Clicking on the Assets tab, we can see that it's associated with an asset of Waterloo Bridge, but very quickly I can also add a new relationship to a new asset using the quick search. So let's add it on to my Kilwarren Bridge. Click the plus sign, and that has now created a relationship between the document and linking it to my new asset. Clicking on the hyperlink will take me to the master asset screen, from where I can view the documents related to that particular asset, and clicking on drawings and sketches, I can see that the document revision that we've just created is now linked and associated with the asset. So let's return to our existing document, and now let's have a look at how to create a document in its own right. So from the Launchpad, I can go to the Documents tile and select New Document. This will change the screen and allow me to enter the appropriate document type from the drop-down list. I can enter a title, a revision number, a description, an effective date, and complete any other custom attributes. And saving will create the actual document, from where I can add files, I can update the attributes and associate the document to any object within the AssetWise solution. And finally, let's take a look at the records management functionality. Again, from the Launchpad, I'm going to view the records from the Records tile. This shows me all of the documents and files that are pending disposal. I can select the appropriate files and either add those to an existing disposal order or create a new disposal order. In my case, I'm going to add a new disposal order. Selecting a disposal type from the template allows me to enter a name, a description, and save, therefore creating the new disposal order. Next, I can set that for approval and send that perhaps to my manager to have it approved. You can see the status code is now set to submit for approval. Using the share facility within AssetWise, I'm going to send an email to my manager, myself in this case, and ask for my manager to approve the disposal order. That's the email sent. So at this stage, I'm going to shut the system down, check my email, have a look for the hyperlink within the email that will take me directly to the disposal order for my approval. You can see it, the system logs in and automatically displays the disposal order that was hyperlinked, from where I can either reject it or, in my case, approve it. And the act of approving it will also execute the disposal order and destroy the files within the disposal order itself. You can see the status now is set to destroyed. If I go back to one of the documents and have a look at it, and have a look at the files, you can see this copy has been destroyed. That concludes the presentation, which I hope you found useful and informative. My name is Colin Stewart, and I can be contacted at colin.stewart@bentley.com. Thank you.